Chapter 6. So if you remember, we left off yesterday, chapter 5, with the two boys, was it Martin and Amos, throwing Edward back and forth. And then when Abilene tackled the boy and hit her head into his stomach, the boy tossed Edward and fell overboard. So that's how chapter 5 ended. So this is chapter 6, and as you can see, there's Edward's hat. How does a China rabbit die? Can a China rabbit drown? Is my hat still on? These were the questions that Edward asked himself as he went sailing out over the blue sky. The sun was high in the sky, and from what seemed to be a very long way away, Edward heard Abilene call his name. "Edward!" she shouted. "Come back!" Come back? Of all the ridiculous things to shout, thought Edward. As he tumbled ears over tail through the air, he managed to catch one last glimpse of Abilene. He sank and sank and sank. She was standing on the deck of the ship, holding on to the railing with one hand. In her other hand was a lamp. No, it was a ball of fire. No, Edward realized it was his gold pocket watch that Abilene held in her hand. She was holding it up high, and it was reflecting the light of the sun. My pocket watch, he thought. I need that. And then Abilene disappeared from view, and the rabbit hit the water with such tremendous force that his hat blew off his head. That answers that question, thought Edward, as he watched the hat dance away on the wind. And then he began to sink. He sank and sank and sank. He kept his eyes open the whole time, not because he was brave, but because he had no choice. His painted-on eyes witnessed the blue water turning to green and then to blue again. They watched as it finally became as black as night. Edward went down and down. He said to himself, "If I'm going to drown, certainly I would have done so by now." Far above him, the ocean liner with Abilene aboard it sailed blithely on, and the China rabbit landed finally on the ocean floor, face down, and there, with his head in the muck, he experienced his first genuine and true emotion. Edward Tulane was afraid. So chapter 6 did not have a title, so I want you to think about what would be a good title for chapter 6 that would sum up the main idea, the main event of chapter 6. And then I want you to come up with a good question you could ask for chapter 6 on a quiz. Today we're going to go ahead and read chapter 7 as well. He told himself that certainly Abilene would come and find him. This, Edward thought, is much like waiting for Abilene to come home from school. I will pretend that I am in the dining room of the house on Egypt Street, waiting for the little hand to move to the 3 and the big hand to land on the 12. If only I had my pocket watch. Then I would know for sure. But it doesn't matter. She will be here soon, very soon. Hours passed, and then days, and weeks, and months. Abilene did not come. Edward, for lack of anything better to do, began to think. He thought about the stars. He remembered what they looked like from his bedroom window. What made them shine so brightly, he wondered, and they were still shining somewhere, even though he could not see them. Never in my life, he thought, have I been farther away from the stars than I am now. He considered, too, the fate of the beautiful princess, who had become a warthog. Why had she become a warthog? Because the ugly witch turned her into one, that was why. And then the rabbit thought about Pellegrina. He felt in some way that he could not explain to himself that she was responsible for what had happened to him. It was almost as if it was she and not the boys who had thrown Edward overboard. She was like the witch in the story. No, she was the witch in the story. True, she did not turn him into a warthog, but just the same, she was punishing him, although for what, he could not say. On the 297th day of Edward's ordeal, a storm came. The storm was powerful. was so powerful that it lifted Edward off the ocean floor and led him in a crazy, wild, spinning dance. The water pummeled him and lifted him up and shoved him back down. Help, thought Edward. The storm in its ferocity actually flung him all the way out of the sea, and the rabbit glimpsed for a moment the light of an angry and bruised sky. The wind rushed through his ears. It sounded to him like Pellegrina laughing, but before he had time to appreciate being above water, he was tossed back down into the depths. Up and down, back and forth he went until the storm wore itself out, and Edward saw that he was beginning again his slow descent to the ocean floor. Oh, help me, he thought. I can't go back there. Help me. But still, down he went. Down, down, down. And then suddenly the great wide net of a fisherman reached out and grabbed the rabbit. The net lifted him higher and higher until there was an almost unbearable explosion of light, and Edward was back in the world, lying on the deck of a ship, surrounded by fish. Ugh, what's this? Said a voice. Ain't no fish, said another voice. That's for sure. The light was so brilliant that it was hard for Edward to see, but finally shapes appeared out of the light and then faces, and Edward realized that he was looking up at two men, one young and one old. Looks like some toy, said the grizzled old man. He bent and picked Edward up and held him by his front paws, considering him a rabbit, I reckon. It's got whiskers and rabbit ears, or the shape of rabbit ears at least. Yeah, sure, a rabbit toy, said the younger man, and he turned away. I'll take it home to Nellie. Let her fix up and set it to rights. Give it to some child. The old man placed Edward carefully on a crate, positioning him so that he was sitting up and could look out at the sea. Edward appreciated the courtesy of this small gesture, but he was heartily sick of the ocean and would have been satisfied never to set eyes on it again. There you go, said the old man. As they made their way back to shore, Edward felt the sun on his face and the wind blowing through the little bit of fur left on his ears, and something filled his chest, a wonderful feeling. He was glad to be alive. Look at that rabbit, the old man said. Looks like it's enjoying the ride, don't it? Yep, said the young man. In fact, Edward Tulane was so happy to be back among the living that he did not even take umbrage at being referred to as it. Now, that's a big word. Miss Harris had to look that up, and that's another word for being offended. Because remember, Edward did not like Pellegrina or others calling him it. He did not take offense to it. Okay, so I want you to do the same thing today for Chapter 7. This is the picture for Chapter 7. I want you to come up with a good title for it, and then I want you to come up with another question for Chapter 7 that would be good to use on a quiz. Okay, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 6 and 7, and I will be back with Chapter 8.